brought to you by Knights of Awakening and the glare that is no longer coming from my head. This is the Labyrinth. So, folks, I'll be wearing one of these from here on out because either I don't get lighting that gives me a good enough resolution, or I get lighting that gives me a good enough resolution on this camera, and it looks like I'm firing death beams from the top of my head. So rather than doing that, I'm going to wear one of these. It's not as much a fashion statement as it is anything to keep something on my head. We're going to talk today about what it means to be Norse. And this is a debated topic in a lot of ways. Not as debated as some others when it comes to defining who and what you are. But in a community that I belong to, one of the questions got brought up, whether or not you can be Norse and be a pacifist. And I think it's an interesting question. I think it's one worth putting a little bit of thought into. So we're going to discuss how the Norse philosophy differs from a lot of other religions. And I say philosophy because, frankly, the idea of a religion that was codified in the way that we think of codification is really, well, it has a lot more to do with religions from somewhere very far, far away from the Norse religion's origins and the Celtic and groups like that. In fact, these are Judaic religions as a rule that have heavy codifications, and Eastern religions. And then even a lot of your Eastern religions don't have heavy codifications. And why that is because most religion and most philosophy is something that's passed down within tribes and within community. And the Norse are no exception to this. A lot was not written down. And what was written down hundreds of years after the fact. Now, the same can be said for the Judaic traditions, and I'm not picking on them in any way. I'm just saying that we really come from a Judaic mind frame when we're like, I need to codify this shit. We really come from that mentality when we're like, I need to write down rules, and I need 9 virtues of manly Norseness to follow, or noble truths, or whatever you want to call them. This is not really anything we've seen that suggests that our forefathers and foremothers did this. Our ancestors likely weren't as big into codification as we are. They did what worked, and the codification was passed down from the king, whoever that was, to the people. That was your codification. The king said so, and you kind of dealt with it. You had systems to keep the king in check in the Norse. But at the end of the day, that was the final authority. Now you had stories. You had stories and poems that were told. You had lore keepers, and you had mystics, and you had any number of things within the community that also helped to shape that. So when we start getting into what it means to be Norse, it certainly doesn't necessarily mean wearing a headband like this and riding around on a motorcycle, which is what I look like I should be doing. Funny thing is, I don't ride a motorcycle. The irony is not lost on me that I'm wearing this when I do this show. And it is irony, and it's not something I intended to do. But what you find is that what it means to be Norse is not as codified in solid steel as it would be in, well, really a lot of other more quote-unquote well-established traditions. Part of this is that when Christianity was introduced, invaded the northern lands, a lot of old texts that did exist got burnt, and a lot of people with old knowledge got killed, and we are very much recreating from very little. But from everything we've recreated, there's very little that says, go do this. Let's use Odin as a good example of this. Odin is an oath breaker. You take the noble virtues or values that the Asatru speak of. Odin is the opposite of all of these. So is Loki, and Thor even has some issues keeping to many, if not most of them. So, with this question of, can you be a pacifist and be Norse? Being Norse really had more to do with being in the culture and part of the community. And we don't have a community in that way anymore, you know. So what's it really mean today? Well, my take on it, you know, for what that's worth to you, is this. I think being Norse has more to do with I don't want to say adherence, not worship, recognition. A recognition of the Norse gods. An understanding of some of the lore, or even most of the lore, that remains. And a tribal mentality, as well as a mentality of recognizing there is more out there. Now, recognition of the gods. Most pagan belief systems don't put the gods as physical beings that, you know, roam around hitting things. We see them as an analogy for a greater flow or a greater part of the world. And the Norse gods are very strange in that because they are people, for all intents and purposes, as flawed and as wonderful as all people are. So when we get into what it means to be Norse, can you be a pacifist and be Norse? You know, can you be Norse and, you know, be sober? And, I mean, abstinent, there, of drink. Can you be Norse and be abstinent of sex? Well, I don't see why not. And how is that then any different? I mean, if we're going to use the Eddas as an example of how you should live your life, I don't know about you, but it's been hours since I've raped, pillaged, or plundered anyone or anything. In fact, I can't remember the last time I've raped, pillaged, and plundered. We can't use the Eddas as a guide for what it means. We have to use them as an inspiration. We have to understand that there needs to be a reverence for the gods, a respect for the gods, and a respect for the traditions and the culture, a respect for the idea beneath what it means to be Norse. Anything else is personal philosophy, and I think it's great that people have personal philosophies, and I love it when people express those personal philosophies. When you get out there and you show off what it is that makes you you, that's great, until the moment at which you look at someone else and say, you can't be you. And with them being Norse, it's a real limited spectrum of what we could say makes a Norseman. Traditionally, what made a Norseman was belonging to the community of the Norse. That was about it. You didn't even really have to believe in the gods. Now that community is gone. You don't have local communities that you can be a part of in that way. What you generally have is, you know, a hammer that you're wearing around your neck, and a lot of reconstruction that you're going to great lengths to do to lay down a personal foundation. But that personal foundation isn't law. So, looking at that, here's what we can say then for the Norse as a whole. Definitely some association with the gods. They are the first thing we think about. An understanding and reverence of the lessons that can be learned from the Eddas. Same goes with the Havamal. Recognizing the Havamal, which is within the Eddas, as a text of wisdom and learning from that. In fact, I very much focus on the Havamal in my own studies. In the Havamal, it makes a statement that you shouldn't go out without a weapon, or without your weapons of war, because you never know when an enemy will be nearby. I would say that it was a different time that was written, but I'd say your first weapon of war is your mind, and you definitely don't want to go out without that. Do you have to be pacifist, or do you have to be warlike, rather? Yeah, do you have to be pacifist to be Norse? No, of course not. Do you have to be warlike? Do you have to be a brutal barbarian to be Norse? I don't think so. I think if you have a respect for other people, you have a respect for the gods, whether you see them as a flow within the universe, as a physical being, or even as a mythology and an analogy, whatever that means, a respect for it, I'd say that makes you Norse. It's harder to codify in some ways than any other belief system. So how about this? You have a calling to the Norse ideas and ideals, and to the path and the understanding to learn more and grow more within this, a reverence for the gods, then you're Norse. And if you're a pacifist too, all the better. All the better for you, I myself am not a pacifist by any measure. If you've watched The Labyrinth, you know that I don't do pacifism. I'm a pacifist. I believe you should packy your fist into the nose of anyone giving you trouble. But there has to be more than just me out there in order to make this work. I'm a mystic. Not all Norse should be mystics either. So to sum up, you need a deep reverence for the gods. You do need to be at least engaging in learning about the mythologies. And you have to have some inner understanding, some concept of honor and dignity to be Norse. Beyond that, everything else is invented. And people invent things to make themselves feel better by making others feel worse. And I'm not going to do that. I myself will fight before standing and dying at someone else's hands. And I'll fight before watching someone else die or get hurt in front of me. But I don't define the way. I don't define the path up the mountain. No one else does either. As the Norse become more of a force within the world, we're going to go through a lot of growing pains in this. And a lot of self-definition issues are going to come up. Remember, hold true to the gods, hold true to yourself and your beliefs. And I'm not ripping anyone off, so I'm not going to go there. I've got a buddy of mine though who has his own slogan. My belief, though, is that part of this is the search for answers within. So long as you're doing that, then you'll be holding to what we're looking to do here. You'll be holding to awakening that part of you that knows where you're at and where you're going. And I hope this show helps with people finding that. I hope that today this helped you awaken the night within.